Network.
Welcome motorsport fans from across Canada. My name is Bruce Hawley. I'm at Ste-Agathe-des-Monts in Quebec for the running of the 7th event in the Canadian National Rally Series. With me is Paul Raymond, one of the best co-drivers in Canada, who will act as our expert commentator during the weekend. Well, Paul, what should we look for this weekend?
Well, Bruce, for the last 4 years, this rally was won by John Buffum and Tom Grimshaw in an Audi Quattro. This year, John Buffum is co-driving in an Audi Quattro with young star Paul Chouanière. Audi also entered another car for veteran driver Bruno Kreibich of New York. A strong entry for Volkswagen comes from Tim O'Neill and Martin Edlin. As for the Canadian hopes, they rest in the hands of Alain Bergeron, the Canadian champion from Quebec, in a Toyota Celica Turbo 4-wheel drive, and of the Ontario pair of John Ludenberger and Rod McDonald in a Nissan 200 SX.
Paul, the engines are starting to rev. The drivers are ready to go. Folks, we'll be back in a little while. Défi Ste-Agathe is a two-day international event where driver and co-driver will cover 800 kilometers in the Quebec Laurentians, just north of Montreal. The rally is part of the North American Rally Championship and the General Tire Rally Championship in Canada. Paul, this being a speed rally, we know the importance and the role of the driver in the car, but what's the role of the co-driver?
Well, during the event, the co-driver has to make sure that the team is at the right place at the right time. He also has to call all the instructions of the route book as accurately as possible. Here on Friday night, I can tell you, Bruce, that the co-drivers will stay up late to prepare the route book and to organize all the service crew schedule for the whole event.
With all the cars in and the drivers and co-drivers in by Friday night and registered, the vehicles then go through scrutineering. Here we see Bruno Kreibich's Audi Quattro. What would be some of the safety features on this vehicle?
First of all, the car must have an approved roll cage and carry a fire extinguisher. Here we see a technical inspector verifying that the car meets all the rally regulations of Canada.
By looking at the cars, we know that these aren't street vehicles. What would be some of the technical changes made to the car?
You're right, Bruce. The cars are prepared with special rally suspensions. They have powerful braking systems, and underneath the car they have a skid plate to protect the engine against rocks and jumps on the gravel roads of the rally.
Well, Paul, it looks like Bruno's car has made it through scrutineering, where now it will be brought to Parc Fermé and held Friday night. The driver and co-driver will finally have an opportunity to have a good night's sleep before they go out rallying on Saturday morning. Well, here we are Saturday morning, day one of Défi Ste-Agathe 88. 51 entries from Canada and the U.S., ranging from the Maritimes right out to Calgary and as far south as Michigan, Ohio. Paul, just to explain and clarify, what are some of the crews doing prior to the start of the rally?
Well, they're checking that all the car is well adjusted, safety seat belts are well adjusted, and that they know for sure where they are going in the rally.
This is a different type of racing. Most of our fans are probably used to seeing flying starts with all the cars going at the same time. How do they control and how do each car start?
The cars will start at 1 minute time intervals, and there we see a marshal that makes sure that the competitors don't leave before their due time.
Sorry, Paul, but I got to cut in. The cars are all ready to go. They're all lined up. The fans are all in place. The road has been closed. And as soon as the course opening car comes through, we're ready for the first car. And sure enough, here comes Buffum and Choinière, and what a jump. Can we expect those kind of jumps from everybody?
Well, Bruce, don't forget this is an Audi Quattro, and the driver, Paul Choinière, is currently at the top of the North American Rally Cup Championship. His co-driver is the famous John Buffum, which is the best driver in the North American rally history.
Well, Luttenberger just came through, and it looks like they mean business also. What can you tell me about the Luttenberger team?
Well, they have a very good car. It's a Nissan 200 SX, and John is currently 5th in the Canadian Championship. He's a tough competitor.
Paul, this is really exciting to watch. What goes on during the stages?
Well, in this rally, first, there are 25 special stages totaling 325 kilometers. In a special stage, the road is closed to all local circulation, and the team has to go as fast as possible between start and finish.
We see Bruno Kreibich going through, and the next one coming through should be the Doug Shepard team. They have a reputation of being very fast. Let's see, Paul, how they take the water hazard.
You're right, Bruce. Doug Shepard is a fast driver, and with the Dodge Shadow, with all the power in that car, he should go out of the water very easily. Here we saw that Doug tried to avoid the water in order to lose the less possible time.
Paul, yeah, I noticed that. Now, I'm anxious to see how the Bergeron team comes through, being a four-wheel drive versus the two-wheel drive. We know that Bergeron is now tied for the lead in the Canadian Championship with the Choinière team. Here they come through the water right now.
Well, we saw the four-wheel drive extract really fast from the water hole. Alain is a very good driver, and he's the last year's Canadian champion, so here he tries to defend his championship.
The next team coming through is the Michel Poirier de Foix team from Quebec. What can you tell me about the Michel Poirier de Foix team?
Well, I can tell you, Michel is a very aggressive driver. He has lots of experience, but he goes very fast, and he gives a very good show to all the spectators here in Ste-Agathe.
It's a new sponsorship for Michel Poirier de Foix, with Ford coming into the Rallying Series. Paul, what a jump by Tim O'Neill. It certainly looks like Tim means business this year.
Yes, Bruce. The team of O'Neill and Martin Edlin are driving a strong Golf GTI, well prepared by Volkswagen factory.
The next team coming through should be another Canadian entry. Where do you think the Canadians are going to do this year?
Well, here we see Philippe Dubé and Gilles Lacroix in a Toyota. They're currently in first of the Production A Canadian Championship, and they should have a good performance, along with Alain Bergeron, John Luttenberger, Michel Defoy, and Sean Bishop from Calgary. The Canadians should have a good showing here this weekend.
Well, Paul, we've been watching the back of the pack. Let's switch to our helicopter shot and see where Paul Choinière and John Buffum are at their stage of the rally. By looking at John and Paul, it looks like Paul means business today.
Well, you can see by the way Paul took this corner that he didn't take much time to warm up at the beginning of this rally.
The next car coming through is a Luttenberger McDonald Nissan. That's the old Randy Black car, which he won the '85 Canadian Championship through. I'm anxious to see how Kreibich is going to take this curve in one of these Audi Quattros, the powerful Audi Quattros. Paul, maybe now's the time to try and explain what goes on in those stages and how long they are.
Well, in this rally, a stage can be as short as 2 kilometers just outside of Ste-Agathe-des-Monts, and can be as long as 55 kilometers in the forest and the provincial parks.
Another part of rallying is their service stages. They occur throughout the rally. How many are there, and what goes on during them?
In this event, there are 9 service points where the service crews meet with the competitors, and they change tires, put gasoline and repairs, and do repairs if necessary.
Paul, this weekend we've got two-wheel drives, four-wheel drives. Maybe you can describe to the fans out there the different driving techniques with these type of cars.
Well, with a front-wheel drive car, drivers will use the left foot braking technique to go through the corners, as we see Tim O'Neill do on this shot. With a rear-wheel drive car, you'll use the accelerator to put the car more sideways in the curve and exit from the curve faster.
Well, Paul, here comes the course opening vehicle, and it looks to me like he's going just as fast as some of the drivers out there.
Well, this guy is Bernard Franquet from Ste-Agathe. He was second overall in this rally last year, so he's as good as most of the drivers in this rally.
Well, looking at this car coming down now, Paul, I don't think he's quite as fast.
I guess you're right, Bruce. The way he slides his way through this curve is really impressive.
The next car coming through is a Lutenberger from the General Tire team.
As a matter of fact, General Tire is the main sponsor of this event and of the Canadian Championship. The next car through should be the Audi Quattro of Bruno Kreibich. Those cars are going from gravel to asphalt on this special curve, but you can see here that the first cars have put a lot of gravel on the asphalt that should be very slippery for the following cars.
I noticed that the gravel is not affecting too much of four-wheel drive, but what's it doing to the two-wheel drive?
Well, it's just like marbles on the road there on the asphalt. It's very, very slippery. Now we'll see the Alain Bergeron with the four-wheel drive Toyota. You can see not very much of sliding, but it's very efficient.
Here comes Michel Poirier de Foix. Let's see how he takes this curve with the gravel on the road. Whoa! Now I see what you mean by his aggressive driving.
Yes, he's aggressive, but his experience helped him on that case to stay on the road and lose only 10 seconds and continuing on the stage.
Here comes Tim O'Neill in a front-wheel drive Volkswagen. I'm anxious to see how he's going to take this turn.
Oh, I tell you what, he needed all his power to exit from that curve.
Here comes Philippe Dubé, and it seems that he's putting on the brakes a little early, but let's see how he goes out of the curve. Well, he took it perfectly. Paul, let's go to the service stage, which is the end of the first leg, and where a lot of the crews are working on their vehicles and getting the vehicles ready for the next stage. Also, the computerized results are coming out after the first leg, and we can see that Choinière-Buffum are leading by almost 1 minute, but the rest of the pack, the next four places, are separated by only 34 seconds, with Bergeron, Kreibich, Lutenberger, and O'Neill going in that order. Let's see what some of the teams had to say at this stage of the rally.
You can be ahead until the very last corner, so to speak, of the last stage. As in racing, you never know what's going to happen. It's nice, better to be a minute ahead than a minute behind.
There's too much rally to go to consider the rally being won. If I continue to drive and the car continues to perform the way things have been up to this point, I think we'll win the rally.
You know, a long stage is difficult for, if we have a mechanical problem, it's difficult in that stage we cannot repair.
Well, Paul, he's so right, and the drivers are heading into the most difficult part of the rally. That is night driving. And with that, folks, we'll see you right after this.
Bruce, Bergeron described it perfectly last night. The long stages were really tough on the cars. Midway through the event, half of the field have been knocked out of the rally, including Bergeron himself and Ludenberger, two of the top Canadians.
It's always like that. With the night in the parks, it's always like that. I thought at the beginning on 50 cars, maybe we'll have 35 on the second day, but we're down to 25 or 26 now. It's quite surprising.
Surprising? No, Paul. I'd say looking at the shape of some of the cars, they look like they've been through a very rough night. But last night was last night, and today is today. So let's go out and see at Tour du Lac and see what is really going on as we see the course opening car coming through.
Tour du Lac is a very spectacular stage, and since today it's raining, we should see a lot of action.
Here comes Choinière-Buffum with a 4-minute lead.
If everything goes well for them today, Paul Choinière will have a very strong hold on the Canadian Championship.
Paul, what makes this car so much superior to the others, it seems? I know the driver has something to do with it, but what about the guy in the seat next to him?
Well, Bruce, the co-driver in this car is John Buffum. He won a lot of rallies. He has great experience. So he's a great teacher for Paul Choinière, and that's no surprise if Paul performs so well.
Now, looking at the cars, we know Bruno Kreibich is coming along now. What would be the difference between those two Audis?
This Audi Quattro has been prepared in Germany at the factory and was designed for the World Championship rallies. This car has a 5-cylinder turbocharged engine with more than 400 horsepower and a 4-wheel drive transmission, so it's a very powerful car.
Will that penalize him on the wet pavement versus the lesser horsepower cars?
Well, it's not a good car on pavement. I mean, it'll get more advantage on gravel and on rough roads than on pavement.
Yeah, I noticed he's wavering a little more than Paul did, and probably that's the horsepower, but when he comes out of the corner in the straightaways, you can see that he is faster. Paul, here comes Tim O'Neill, who's now in third place, 34 seconds behind Bruno Kreibich. But from what I can see, Tim plans on catching up with a few seconds here on this Tour du Lac.
Well, I think Tim is a very aggressive driver on asphalt. He should take a few seconds here.
Here we see him coming down the straightaway, and it seems the suspension is a little different than the other guys that have been through.
I've noticed this morning that Tim mechanics were working on the suspension. From what we see here, I can tell you that they did a very good job.
Well, it seems to have worked because I think Tim has picked up some seconds on Bruno. Here come Betty Ann and Dan Gilliland on the factory-sponsored Dodge Shadow. I think Dan and Betty Ann are probably the fastest rally couple in North America.
They are currently fourth overall in this rally, and this year they had very good showings both in Canada and United States.
Paul, I've just heard something over the radio. It's not confirmed yet, but it seems that Buffum have left the road at the end of the Tour du Lac stage.
Well, that would be too bad. We have to check about that because that will change the rally a lot.
Well, we'll be able to confirm that in a few moments, but meanwhile, let's watch Philippe Dubé, who is currently in 7th position with his co-driver Virgile Lacroix, but leading Production A over Neil Leslie by 5 minutes. You know, Paul, I'm looking around this stage, and I'm amazed at the amount of people that are here. It's really encouraging to see that in this wet weather, cold weather, that there's so many people that are coming out here to watch this rally.
The spectators really love this stage, and they come year after year to see the show here. This is the 7th edition of the Défi Ste-Agathe, and the number of spectators increases year after year.
Well, Paul, here comes close closing vehicle, and we can confirm that Chouanière has been taken out, and our helicopter shot shows that Paul is now out of the race and changes everything.
What a turn of event. Chouanière enjoying such a big lead. This has got to be the major upset of the weekend.
Definitely, Paul. This is a brand new rally. And as we look at the standings now, we notice that O'Neill and Hedlund are now leading over Kreibich and Bond by 3 seconds, followed by Gilliland and Gilliland, another minute and 43 seconds behind, and in 6th place, but in 1st in Production A, the Dubé team.
We are now at the last service point of the rally, and with 5 stages remaining, we should have a great battle between the first 2 cars.
Paul, as we're heading into the last 5 stages of the rally, what do you think the strategy will be on the different teams?
Well, I think the first 2 teams will have to go flat out, and the other cars that are ranging from 3rd to 10th, their positions are established, so they just have to finish the rally to keep their positions.
Well, Paul, it looks like Bruno Kreibich is ready to go, and I've been told as we watch him accelerate away that they can go from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 5 seconds. And as we look at Bruno go away, we can see Tim O'Neill is really restless to go and get going and getting some seconds on Bruno. As we watch Kreibich go, one of the things that the fans, I'm sure, are wondering about is, do the drivers or co-drivers know the road before they go out on it?
No, Bruce. Unlike racing, the course is unknown. The only information that teams have is in the route book, and that's where the co-driver plays an important role. As a matter of fact, in this rally, the drivers won't see the same curve more than twice in the 800 kilometers of the event.
Does the fact that some of these roads have been run before by some of these drivers and co-drivers give an advantage to them?
Well, of course, the guys that have run this event before have, the drivers used to have very good road memories, so some dangerous curves are known by some of the competitors from the preceding years. But every year the organizer will try to introduce some new roads in the rally.
One of the things that I've learned from the co-drivers and drivers is that they've told me that they can follow the road pretty well by looking at the tree line. In your experience when you were co-driving, did you ever use that technique?
Of course I was using that technique, but it's a very dangerous technique. You only use it when the rally is very tight, like here between O'Neill and Kreibich, when you have to get every second you can take. So it's a technique to be used, but carefully.
One of the other things that I've noticed is that as the cars go around the curves or the turns, a lot of them leave grooves. Do you try and follow the other guy's groove in front of you, or do you try and take your own groove?
No, Bruce, you don't really choose your groove, but in this case, I think Philippe Dubé took a really personal groove on that curve.
I think Philippe was really lucky there because with first place at stake in Production A, he could have been knocked out of it with less than 4 stages left in the race. Here comes our current leader, Bruno Kreibich, going into the second last stage of the rally. After 2 days of driving, I would think, Paul, with all your experience and having been in this type of tight situation and in an important event like this, what would be the effect of wear and tear on these drivers physically?
Of course, the reflexes are not as sharp as the beginning of the rally. The teams get tired of battling for a few seconds here and there. Nearing the end of the rally, the drivers have to concentrate to keep the car on the road, and the co-drivers have to make sure that they don't make a mistake. But with the end being so close, I'm sure they'll find all the necessary energy.
Well, with the last stage being run at night, I'm sure that's going to have some effect on some of the drivers and possibly the outcome of the rally. Another factor that could come into play is, Paul, I don't believe the drivers and the co-driver is allowed to make any repairs with their service crews going into the last stage of the rally.
You're right, Bruce. The service is only allowed in designated service areas, and from this stage to the next, the competitors will have a slow transit section, but there's no service area on that section.
Well, Paul, we're really down to the wire, so let's get to the last stage and see some of the drivers' comments.
Well, we're only 2 seconds ahead of the next guy.
And if you're the smoothest one, you'll be the fastest one, and that'll count.
Just have to let Tim drive the car. There's nothing I can do about it now. Nothing whatsoever.
May the fastest man win.
The cars are ready to go, Paul. The crowd is on hand.
Bruce, 2 seconds difference going into the last stage. It can't be any closer.
Well, you can hear from the crowd, and I'll tell you something. I've never seen anything that close in any rally I've been at, and certainly I don't think there's been any rally in North America in the last 5 years where a 2-second spread makes the difference between a winner and a loser.
You're right, Bruce, and O'Neill and Kreibich will really have to go flat out on this short stage.
Well, Paul, this is a very short stage, and I wonder if Tim O'Neill will have enough time and power to be able to catch up to Bruno Kreibich.
So you managed to keep your 2 seconds?
I managed to add 2 more.
You had 2 more to what you had already?
I managed to add 2 more seconds. So I have 4 seconds ahead now.
Well, it went quite well. The problem is that it was a very rough stage, and it needed a lot of horsepower and a lot of traction, and he had both. There's only so much you can do with 2-wheel drive, and Bruno drove very well.
We are first Production A, first Canadian, and first, of course, of General Tire.
Well, Paul, Défi 88 is now history. As an expert in the field, what were the highlights of the weekend for you?
Well, Bruce, the biggest highlight and disappointment of the weekend is certainly the accident of Paul Choignard and John Buffum. They were ahead of the rally with a comfortable lead when they rolled the car in Toad's Lac. This created an opening for Bruno Kreibich in the Audi Quattro and Tim O'Neill in the Volkswagen. And going into the last stage, Bruno had only a 2-second lead on Tim. He managed to pick up 2 more in the last stage, and this is the smallest margin, the smallest winning margin in Canadian rally.
And what about our Canadian drivers?
Unfortunately, Alain Bergeron had mechanical problems and he couldn't finish the event. But Philippe Dubé had a great performance and he was a top Canadian and first in Production A and first for General Tire.
In closing, Paul, I think we'd like to thank the people at General Tire for sponsoring the National Series and also the organizers of Défi 88 for putting on a great event. We'll say goodbye to you folks and see you in '89.